let's start our next panel. I hope there will be more people to come in the room, but we already need to start. I will start by making announcement, which is probably already not in use, but still, I think no one mentioned that just recently we had decision published by the European Commission to recommend opening negotiations with Ukraine, with Moldova, on accession to the European Union, also to grant candidate status to Georgia, and also to open negotiations with Bosnia and Herzegovina, if there will be conditions in place. So basically, it's a very positive day. Now we are switching our attention to a particular place in the Central Europe. A part of it, definitely, but actually the question of our panel, the topic is formulated as Belarus, not as an integral part of Central and Eastern Europe, but as an integral part of an imminent threat to Central and Eastern Europe. The question is there any strategy in place? Strategy, as I understand, for us, for Ukraine, and for the European Union as well, for European Union member states, for Central European countries. So I think we start from basically agreeing that Belarus is now part of the problem, part of the threat. And we definitely want it to not to be part of the threat. Question is how to get there, what exactly could be achieved, and how could be achieved. So basically the strategy. And this is an open question to discuss with a very great collection of panelists. I will ask to start Pavlo Wright from Ukrainian Prism to present a vision, a paper presented by your think tank on Belarus, suggestions for Ukraine policy. And then we will continue with discussing with other colleagues representing Ukraine and Belarus. And I will be hoping that also other colleagues from European Union countries will be joining from the audience with comments and questions. So please, Pablo.
Thank you a lot. As you rightly say, Belarus is a problem. And the problem is that Belarus is a problem for everyone and for no one simultaneously. We all know about the threats that our neighbor poses to Ukraine, to Poland, to Lithuania. And these threats can be separated into three categories. The first category is basically attempts to penetrate in the territories of neighboring states, and it is relevant for Poland and for Lithuania, which had been an object of migration crisis. And despite the end of the active phase of this crisis, migrants are still trying to break through the borders from time to time. Another part of this problem is the Wagner troops, which are basically located on the territory of Belarus, and it is not clear what they will do next in the next months, but still potentially there is the risk that they will try to cross the borders, and that's why Poland and Lithuania have to put a close eye on it. Second group is nuclear threats. Belarus has recently built a power plant in Ostrovets, which is 50 kilometers away from Vilnius. And Lithuania urged in any possible way to stop the commissioning of the power plant and stop the building of the power plant. Then it, together with Baltic states, declared boycott of Belarusian electricity. And now this power plant serves only one goal: to serve interests of Alexander Lukashenko to be a leader of a nuclear state. The same goes with deployment of non-strategic nuclear weapons in Belarus. Despite the fact that they are under control of the Kremlin, it is some sort of an instrument of Alexander Lukashenko to project his power on the neighboring states and to be a permanent threat. And the third level is the level of military reality. And it's basically the problem for Ukraine, because there is always a threat that Belarus will start a ground operation, or that air attacks will be renewed. This leads us to the evolution of the policy of Ukraine towards Belarus, because Ukraine is in a pretty fascinating position. On one hand, the relations with the official Minsk deteriorated. Diplomatic relations, political relations are currently on hold. Trade relations deteriorated as well. They almost do not exist. But on the other hand, official Kyiv is reluctant to cooperate with Belarusian democratic forces, namely Svetlana Tikhanovskaya and her team, which is basically part of this problem. And it leads us to the issues Ukraine is facing when dealing with Belarus. Firstly, Ukraine seems to be downplaying the role of Belarus in Russian aggression against Ukraine. This may be due to the fact that possibly some political agreements have been established with the official Minsk, and both states outlined possible red lines for each other. And taboo on cooperation with democratic forces may be one of the red lines that regime of Lukashenko has drawn for itself. Despite the fact that Ukrainians are pretty determined, at least politically, to the change of the status quo in Belarus, there is no actions in cooperation with Svetlana Tikhanovskaya and in bolstering the capabilities of the Kalinovsky Regiment. Kalinovsky Regiment is one of the centers of the Belarusian democratic movement, and it is now, its voice is so strong that we cannot ignore it. But Kyiv decided to assign pretty narrow role to the Kalinovsky Regiment, which is mainly of political nature. So we will understand that Kalinovsky Regiment is not a big military unit, it is not even the brigade, and that it cannot influence the situation on the battlefield. But it is a part of instruments of deterrence of the Lukashenko regime, and such a approach prevents Belarusian volunteers from becoming a bigger military force and from finding the possible ways for their institutionalization. Another problem is that Ukraine lacks clear information policy towards Belarus. It can be seen on one pretty fascinating example. 86% of Ukrainians believe that Belarus should pay reparations for its cooperation with the Russian Federation, cooperation against Ukraine. But on the other hand, 76% of Ukrainians consider Belarus to be an occupied state. And lack of expert assessment of the situation, lack of normal approach to Belarus in our media leads to such results, and leads to the fact that Ukrainians do not always separate Russians from Belarusians, and usually they think that they are both almost the same. Another problem is that Ukraine do not work with Belarusians and do not work with society. There is no clear migration policy for Belarusians. A lot of them had to flee the country after the beginning of the large-scale invasion because of lack of opportunities to legalize themselves. Problem with legalization also affects Belarusian volunteers who, after demobilization, sometimes flee the country even illegally because they cannot stay here. They cannot have their permanent or temporary residence permits extended. Poland, on the other hand, works much better with Belarusian society and with Belarusian democratic forces. They have been established vast infrastructure of cooperation, and it goes beyond just meetings with high-ranking politicians. It goes beyond some talks, because Svetlana Tikhanovskaya and her team work closely on the question of holding accountable Belarusians who were responsible for the repressions in 2020. Also, a positive sign for all democratic movement is that recently Poland has appointed special envoy, Polish MFA, for cooperation with democratic forces of Belarus, and it is a positive signal that Poland will continue supporting Ukraine, will continue supporting Belarusian democratic forces in long-term run. However, there are some issues when it comes to the Polish strategy on Belarusian direction. Firstly, because Poland is somehow constrained by its dependency on partners in decision-making on the European level, especially it's related to the sanctions, because sometimes Poland tried to push forward the narrative that sanctions, anti-Belarusian and anti-Russian sanctions should be synchronized, but it means reluctancy on the side of European countries who do not always want to tighten who do not always want to deprive Lukashenko from the space for maneuvering, and who do not always want to noose around Lukashenko's neck, tighten the noose around Lukashenko's neck. Despite the fact that Belarus is one of the most sanctioned states in the world, it is still not isolated. And it was due to the fact that some Western states still cooperate with Belarus, namely Israel or Hungary or South Korea. And also Belarus was able to reorient its policy towards the East. And now it cooperates more and more with Russia, which is naturally, but also with China, which is the second biggest partner of Belarus right now, and the second biggest trade partner of Belarus. Also, Belarus is trying to foster cooperation with African states and with states in Latin America. Another problem Poland faces is the lack of opportunities to cooperate with Kalinowski Regiment, because Kalinowski Regiment is basically, legally, it is a part of Ukrainian armed forces, and it's not completely independent in its decision-making. And consequently, it constrains Polish abilities to be a coordinator between the most powerful centers of Belarusian democratic movement. Lithuania, as well as Poland, has a pretty well-established infrastructure of cooperation with society and Belarusian democratic forces, but there are some issues which started in 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine, and Lithuanians started perceiving Belarusians, especially those who are Russian-speaking, as more pro-Russian, and as some sort of threat. Now we can also see the tendency to differentiate Belarusians into good ones who arrived in Belarus after the events in 2020, and those who are suspicious ones who arrived to Belarus after 2022. The growth of negative attitudes toward Belarusians may force them to leave Lithuania and actually to endanger the existence of the infrastructure of cooperation with Belarusian society and influence Belarusian society. And another problem, pretty similar to the Polish one, is lack of diplomatic weight. In 2020, Lithuania tried to coordinate all the actions of Western states concerning Belarus, but it failed. And now Lithuania is not able to do this as well. Again, because of the different positions within the EU, because of different positions between its partners, and because of different interests of each party. So this situation is the following. It is necessary to continue working on creation of infrastructure of influence in relation to Belarus. And what is more important, that these actions should be somehow coordinated on the regional level, for example, in the framework of the Lublin Triangle, and most importantly, on the European level, on the level of the European Union. Now, I will try to make some short points and tell what can be actually done. Firstly, European countries, as well as Ukraine, should pay more attention to Belarus. And they should work with civil society. They should work with even low-rank and middle-rank Belarusian civil servants who remain in Belarus in order to provoke differentiation of the regime representatives, and also it is quite necessary to work on the bringing up of new generation of civil servants within the framework of the personal reserve program, because then they'll be able not only to be active citizens, and they will be able to manage the country. Ukraine should finally start cooperating with the United Transitional Cabinet. It can be done in different ways, but the fact that Ukraine starts doing that is a huge push forward towards institutionalization of the cabinet in Ukraine, and it is a good step forward towards the unification of actions of two centers, Belarusian democratic forces, because Ukraine can actually take on the role of coordinator between those two centers, and it's important to do so. Ukraine and Lithuania also need to reassess their immigration policies towards Belarusians, and especially it's related to Ukraine, when Belarusians cannot live here legally, when they cannot live normally, when they cannot receive compensation, when they cannot study in Ukraine. It undermines the position of our country in relation to Belarusian society, and it undermines the view of Belarusians in Ukraine. Ukraine, Poland, Lithuania should also start influencing those Belarusians who are in the country, and can be done through diaspora, because almost everyone has contacts with relatives, colleagues, partners who are in Belarus, and this way of communication may be useful in terms of breaking through the informational bubble which is in Belarus, and providing people with more clear, with more truthful information about the reality. And last but not least, Ukraine, Poland, and Lithuania should be ready to increase both pressure and incentives. It would be appropriate to slightly change the approach to sanctions and to concentrate more on sanctioning Russian companies with Belarusian assets, or the companies who work with Belarusian counterparts. It will actually undermine cooperation between Russia and Belarus. And also, it makes sense to develop and deliver to Lukashenko confidential roadmap of possible concessions the regime could make, and how Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, and other states would react to such situations. It doesn't mean that everyone should try to re-establish relations with Lukashenko.
Excuse me, just can you please clarify again, to establish a roadmap of possible consensus of Lukashenko?
Yeah, to Western countries and to Ukraine. And what could be the possible reaction of the states to such actions on behalf of the Lukashenko regime? So maintaining the exchange of signals in current situation is important because it would allow to track the mood of Belarusian dictator and to have both deterrence and delay tools in the case of escalation. So maybe I would stop on this point, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Quite a number of interesting proposals to discuss. Yulia, if you don't mind, I would maybe change the order of, suggest to change the order of this panel. Maybe, if you don't mind, if Valery and Andrei would speak first and then you would in the end, okay? So that we have now immediate kind of to hear positions and proposals and analysis from Belarusian experts, and then we will come back to some Ukrainian voice as well, and then open the floor. So, Valery, please.
Thank you. Thank you to Ukrainian Prism, to all the organizers and the partners for inviting us here. This is a gift for us to be part of this conversation. This is not a given that Belarus is noticed these days, even though the topic of the discussion is that Belarus is a threat, imminent threat. However, attention to the situation in Belarus and to the strategy with regard to Belarus is not always present. And this is an important opportunity for us to be a part of this conversation, especially in the context of the Central European processes. Definitely that Belarus has become a threat. This is a dark page in Belarusian history, that we are on the wrong side of events here. Belarus inadvertently, because of bad will of Lukashenko and his dependence on Russia, has dragged our country in the aggression against Ukraine. The country that is very close to us historically, culturally, linguistically, and this has put Belarus in an even deeper isolation internationally, has undermined its sovereignty. In addition to us bringing so much damage to bilateral relations and to Ukraine, this new context also created a threat to Belarus itself, to its independence, to its sovereignty, to its national identity. Russia has used the illegitimacy of Lukashenko internally and his unpopularity among Belarusians to impose its interests on the country, to subjugate Belarus, to try to overtake it. What we have seen so far is that Belarus has become instrumentalized to serve the national interests of Russia. And we have seen along the entire perimeter of Russian border how Russians have become assertive, rather aggressive, overstepping the boundaries of not only national borders but also international law. And unfortunately, Belarus has become part of their plan to inflict damage on the countries in Central Europe. And yes, Belarus is part of the problem, but similarly, it can be part of the solution. The war against Ukraine at this stage has become possible because of Lukashenko's involvement in it, because the invasion or the initial thrust of the war was against Kiev, and it was possible to be done only from the territory of Belarus. So in our assessment, this war would not have even started if it were not for Lukashenko's willingness to provide territory infrastructure to Russian forces. If we assume this, then we can logically come to also to understanding that this war can also end in Belarus. What do I mean? At the moment, the scenarios for Belarus are probably rather weak. They're quite negative. If we consider two basic scenarios, is that if Ukraine wins, then Russia would like to compensate somehow the losses from this war, and Belarus would be the most low-hanging fruit for it. If Russia prevails, then there would be no need for Belarus to stay independent any longer, which means this is a lose-lose situation for Belarus. However, if we concentrate on bringing democracy to Belarus, to liberate it from the dictatorship, and to remove Russian forces from Belarus, this could be a winning strategy not only for Belarusians, but also for Ukraine. Because Russia in this war without Belarus will be handicapped in a way that it would be impossible for it to conduct this war any longer, to maintain internal political situation, to control it further, and this is probably a kind of a simplified formula, but nevertheless, in my opinion, the shortest way to Ukrainian victory now lies through democratic Belarus. This view has been supported by a number of politicians through different formulas, but essentially saying like the strongest sanctions against Russia would be a democratic Belarus. This was said by Minister of Foreign Affairs of Estonia, Rinsalu, and many other politicians and leaders, national leaders, maintain this position as well. Including Ukrainians. Ukrainian leadership also says that this is in the vital interest of Ukraine to see Belarus as an independent state, independent and democratic state. However, there has not been a formulated strategy on how to achieve this state of affairs in Belarus. Yes, Ukraine sees this abnormality as fixable, but at the same time, there has not been a sort of a consistent approach from Kyiv to support democratic forces of Ukraine on our path to liberate Belarus from dictatorship and from military presence of Russia. And this is, I would say, the most visible gap in our own strategy on how to make democratic Belarus possible. I would name some of the achievements that we have made on this path while working with the European Union, with the United States. By now, we have managed to maintain a consolidated position of the Western countries with regard to the situation in Belarus. Lukashenko remains unrecognized. He is an illegitimate leader of Belarus in the eyes of the European Union, United States, UK, Canada. We see growing chorus of voices from Western governments, certain that Svetlana Tikhanovskaya is the one. She won the elections, and she is the only representative of Belarusian people, and she is the rightful. She should be the rightful president of Belarus. She should have been inaugurated. And Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden just this Monday was speaking in Vilnius with his program speech on Belarus, speaking about the need to integrate Belarus in the European Union. The other idea that came in the speech is that Belarus should also be integrated in regional initiatives, for example, Nordic Council. And Swedes openly tell us when we speak to them in consultations and various briefings that they consider Belarus as Sweden's neighbor, which is a welcome sign to us, of course, even though we're separated by the Baltic Sea and there is no physical border uniting Sweden and Belarus. Nevertheless, they look into the future, they project their vision of today into the future, knowing that Belarus should be part of the European formula, of the European family. And this contrasts rather strongly with the position of Ukraine in this regard. When we speak, for example, about Lublin Triangle, the absence of Belarus is not only too visible but also absurd. because Lublin Triangle follows the Lublin Union of 1569. That was the confederation of the four nations. I would put it this way, and Belarus was an integral part of it. So without Belarus, this initiative will always look incomplete. However, other countries, such as Sweden, they can act boldly, they can act resolutely, and invite Belarus to participate in such initiatives as Nordic Council. At the same time, we cannot say with certainty that the Western governments, the Western general, has a clear and consistent strategy on Belarus, be it the United States or the European Union. Yes, there is understanding that they should support democratic forces, aspirations of Belarusian people to bring democracy. However, there's also a factor of Russia, and it's still looming in the considerations of Western governments. They do not want to challenge Russia openly, to the point that when we've been raising the issue of Russia's attempt to subjugate Belarus, and calling for specific steps from Western governments to address this, to somehow respond to Russia's efforts to subjugate our country. There is no such line of actions from Western governments. Just today, the Bundestag adopted a resolution on Belarus, which is rather strong. And for the first time, I would say they use the language that Russia should receive a strong response to what they do against Belarus. On our part, we have clarified our agenda and made it absolutely clear that the current state of relations, bilateral relations between Belarus and Russia, is absolutely not acceptable for Belarus, because this is the path to us losing independence, sovereignty, and national identity. Because Russians are acting in exactly this manner, to wipe out national identity of Belarus. Therefore, we adopted an framework approach to revise relations of democratic Belarus with Russia, meaning that we will be leaving the CSTO, we will be leaving the Union State Treaty, all the economic agreements with Russia will have to be revised and based on the criteria of how harmful they are to the national interests of Belarus. Instead, Belarusian democratic forces adopted an objective of not just European perspective for Belarus, but joining the European Union as a full-scale member. And we are just starting this conversation with our partners in the European Union. But the idea is that already now, without waiting for democratic change in Belarus, we have to start preparations for this moment. So that when Belarus is free, when there is democratic process, we have to seize on this opportunity and to sign the association agreement with the European Union as soon as possible. And for that, we have to start this preparation of this specific instrument without delay. So to summarize, the situation is rather uneven. There's a lot of energy in democratic forces, among democratic forces of Belarus. Never before we have been as united as we are now. Surprisingly, this movement is led by Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, who is not a professional politician. She's never been prepared for this. But at the same time, she's managed to stay a unifying force for everybody. She has managed to win the highest possible level of access, political access in all major Western capitals, including Washington, D.C., including in Brussels, in London, Paris, and Berlin. This contrasts again with the position of Ukraine, but this is something that we have to address, because we feel that without Ukraine's active participation in resolving the crisis in Belarus, our path will be much, much longer. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Andrei, please take the floor.
Thank you very much for possibility to be here. In the title of this panel, there is a phrase concerning strategy, and I will try to speak about strategy of the European Union towards Belarus. Strategy as some general plan that should bring to some long-term aims. Recently, I participated in a seminar that was specifically devoted to the strategy of European Union in relations to Belarus. After a while, one of the organizers said that, we discussed these issues last year, so we must invent something new. We have to hear it often, such words. The problem is that if you have to come up with new things every year, it's no longer about strategy, because it's impossible to change strategy every year. Especially if we speak about countries like Belarus, the internal political processes are slow, and the countries that are heavily dependent on other country like Russia. So if we speak about strategy of, or if we would answer the question, if is there any strategy in place, my short answer is no. It's better to speak about about a set of approaches towards Belarus that have developed during last several decades. Some of them were efficient, some of them not, but it never was a strategy, like some concrete plan with some design, with understanding of aims, and it never was long-term strategy. And now I will try to mark the main points of possible long-term strategy of the European Union in relation to Belarus. And I will mention 5 points concerning Belarusian society and 2 points concerning Belarusian authorities. That I think it's very important to distinguish. In the first dimension of the relations concerning society, and the second concerning Belarusian authorities. The first point concerning Belarusian society is that practically all Belarusians have European identity. There were many challenges from Russia, from different concepts like Russian world, Eurasia, and so on, to replace this identity. But actually, they have failed, and now even Belarusian authorities, even Lukashenko, has to use these concepts like Belarus as a European state, as a part of Europe, as a country in the center of Europe, and so on and so forth. And I think that this European identity is an asset for Europe, because it makes Belarus much more resilient to different anti-Western and anti-European narratives. At least in comparison with many other countries like Russia, like Azerbaijan, Arab states, and other neighbors of Europe. So any things that can strengthen Belarusian European identity should be supported, and I think it's very important from strategical point of view. Belarus is not a part of Russia, is not a part of Euro, Asia, is not a part of Russian world. These concepts are not very widespread in Europe, not as in comparison with the United States, but still we can see these concepts in different European states, especially in Western European states like France, Spain, Italy, and some others. The second point concerning Belarusian society is that except European identity, a large part of Belarusian society shares European values. We can discuss it's how many people in Belarus share these values, and there are many different views concerning this, but it's obvious that not less than a third of population, probably it's about half of population. And these people shouldn't be isolated from Europe, from the European Union, even in the circumstances of war, of security crisis in our region, and so on. These people should receive free information, should be able to get education according to European standards, to be integrated in different European mechanisms of cooperation, and so on and so forth. Of course, it's not very easy, and we know that there are many different views concerning this issue in member states. But as a strategic aim, it should be implemented, and I think it's very, very important. The third point concerns information and media. We have rather vibrant media sector, or vibrant Belarusian media sector, that influence at least the third of population, if we speak about the direct influence. If we speak about, if we add indirect influence, it's more than a half of population, more or less, under influence of Belarusian medias. Most of them are out of Belarus now in emigration, but they work with their audience. They influence the situation in Belarus. They have very interesting and I think useful experience working in very difficult conditions, in working abroad, in struggling disinformation, and so on and so forth. And I think that the development of this informational sector should be one of the strategic aim for European Union. It's important not only for Belarus, but I think as experience it could be important and could be useful for Europe in general, for other neighboring countries, neighboring to European Union. The next point concerns education, science, and culture. Belarus, some kind of different mechanisms should be elaborated and should be supported to give possibility for Belarusians to get education in European institutions, probably in online, probably in some other formats, and it's I think crucial for sustainable development, or those people in Belarus who share European values. At the same time, we should take into consideration that after 2020, especially after 2020, many directions of research on Belarus were practically destroyed in Belarus. A great number of researchers and scholars left the country. And there are two ways of their careers to be just distributed between different countries, and probably they will be lost for Belarusian intellectual sphere, or probably we will preserve this community for future Belarus and for better understanding of Belarus in European Union. And from my point of view, some institutions should be elaborated to support this community and to stimulate its development and to research Belarus and not not just to distribute Belarusian researchers among different European countries. And the same concerning Belarusian culture, because many institutions of cultural institutions were destroyed in Belarus after 2020. And it's very important to recreate them in European Union. And the last point concerning Belarusian society concerns Belarusian civil society institutions and Belarusian democratic movement. I think that the strategic aim should make these institutions a part of European decision-making concerning Belarus and probably Eastern Europe in general. I understand all limitations, and if I speak about decision-making, I don't mean that they should vote, but at least be in the process as a consultant or in some exchange of information. And in general, these institutions, political institutions and civil society institutions shouldn't be just recipients of European funds. They should be partners in these programs and should be more and more responsible for cooperation of European Union with Belarus. And 2 points concern Belarusian state, Belarusian authorities. It's more difficult, it seems, to distinguish any concrete strategy, but I think that the main, the core or the strategy should be containment. Containment concerning internal policy and containment concerning Belarusian foreign policy and economic relations. Concerning internal policy, some kind of system should be created to make repressions as much expensive for Belarusian authorities as possible. This system should be flexible, but it should be very concrete, that more reflection, more repressions and more restrictions means means less money, and more economic problems for the authorities. And the second point concerning foreign policy and economic relations with other countries, it's very important. We know that Belarus now is some kind of client state of Russia, and the level of dependence is great. So the strategies should be reduce reduce the level of profitability of cooperation of Belarusian authorities with Russia. Probably some sanctions should be used, probably some other mechanisms, but it's very important to make this cooperation not so profitable as it is now. As an example, you can take, for instance, military industry of Belarus that now is very profitable, and this industry attracts a great number of monies. But at the same time, the level of restrictions, especially not to the farms or enterprises, but to the whole infrastructure that is involved in this process is not very high. And these, at the same time, increase military potential of Russia, and at the same time increase dependence of Belarus from Russia. So all kind of these mechanisms and all kind of these possibilities should be used to reduce actually profits of Belarusian authorities in cooperation with Russia, especially if we speak about such industries like military and other elements of security sector. That's all, probably. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Yulia, please, floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. It's always kind of difficult to be the last, but I'll try to react to some of the points that have been made by all the previous speakers. And so I would like to start with the title of the panel. And the title says, Yuna asked the question whether Belarus is a threat. And I would say that we should probably word it a little bit differently. Belarus is not a threat in and of itself. Belarus is more of an enabler of the Russian threat, So it's, and it's not so much Belarus, but Lukashenko's regime, which is an enabler of the Russian threat to Ukraine, and not only to Ukraine. And I think in this respect, we should differentiate between Belarusians and Russians, because when we talk about Russian aggression, of which Belarus unfortunately is a part, we can remember about the point in which there was a huge pressure on Lukashenko to actually get Belarusian troops involved in the Ukrainian conflict directly, and he refused. And one of the factors behind that decision was that Belarusians actually were very strongly opposed to participating directly in this aggression, unlike a lot of Russian citizens who supported the aggression and who actually share the imperial ambitions that their president has. And so I think in this respect, we have a very clear difference between Russia and Belarus and the moods of the population. And so the basis to differentiating between people and the regime. Also, when we talk about Belarus, of course, it's people who stay in Belarus and who are most likely either support Lukashenko as the president, because we understand that some people did vote for him in the elections, although we don't really know due to the falsifications how many people did. But we know that many people opposed him due to the protests that we've seen. And and there is a large share of Belarusians who actually fled Belarus, and the opposition forces who actually tried to change things, right? So it's a kind of a complicated and complex structure. And when we talk about strategies, of course, especially if it's the strategy that we all agree on, that Belarus espouse, that Belarus, it's in everybody's interest that Belarus is democratic and that it's free and that is a part of European family. To implement such a strategy, there has to be a central actor, right? So somebody who's going to take responsibility for actually deciding how this is done and how do we get there. And so at this point, it looks like that this is the democratic opposition in Belarus. And so it's the opposition first and foremost that needs to come up with this strategy, because European Union or Ukraine, we cannot give you answers to the questions you're facing. We can help you, but we can't do this for you. And I think that's the same problem that Ukraine is facing now, right? In countering Russian aggression. It's first and foremost our own responsibility, and other countries and other states can help us, but also considering their own interests and their own abilities and capabilities. And when we think about strategy, it's very useful to think about things that one can control, that one can influence, and that one have no influence over. And when we think about Belarus, I think it's pretty clear at this point that the factor that nobody can really control is Russia, and it's basically the same problem for all of us in Central Europe and for Ukraine. It's one kind of problem. For Belarus, it's a different kind of problem, but still it's the same problem. It's Russia. And for as long as that factor is present, and for as long as Russia preserves its current capabilities, it's very unlikely that any significant progress on in achieving those goals that we all see is going to be made. We need to do something about Russia, but there are things that we can control, and those things concern our own development, right? So our own capabilities. And when we think about a country becoming a democracy, and again, looking at Ukrainian experience, we understand that democratization is not about personalities. Democratization is about deep societal changes, and about changing the way the society is organized, about changing the way the society makes decisions, takes responsibility upon itself, and this is the work that, again, those people who believe that they are the central actor, that's the work that they need to start doing right now. Start organizing, start thinking how if Russia's no longer there, and Lukashenko does not enjoy as the support that he's enjoying, and there is a window of opportunity, how do you come to power? If you're a democratic opposition, then usually you come to power through an election. So who organizes the election? Of course, there are some the administrative part, but also there is the political part, right? So if you're a political party, you need to organize. You have to have observers. You have to have commissioners. You have to have all these people who will be representing you. Like, how do you come to power? Where do these people come from? I understand that probably this sounds very unrealistic given the current situation, but these things you need to be asking yourself these questions. Like, how do you get there? It's not only civil servants, because civil servants are people who already perform the functions of government, but you need to get to the government first. And also coming back to the issue of personalities, it was said here that it's a problem that Ukrainian authorities do not meet with Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, and frankly speaking, I don't see why this is a problem. I don't see what this meeting is going to help, especially at this point. We understand why Ukrainian authorities do not meet with her. We understand the situation in which Ukraine finds itself, but is it if they do meet with her? So what is it going to do? Like what is it going to help her in any way to have more legitimacy inside of Belarus? I don't think so. But if she's a democratic leader, she needs to have legitimacy inside, and I don't see that legitimacy inside of Belarus comes from the meeting with Ukrainian authorities. But I do agree that Ukrainian help is important, and I think that what is important at this point is contacts at the level of the society, so that we as a country that is going through this democratization process, we can share our experience. We can build these ties, and when the window of opportunity opens, and we don't know when this is going to happen, then and but it happens when there is no more threat from the Russian Federation, and so Ukraine's hands will not be as tied as they are right now. And so, if this ground is built, then we can be of help and of assistance. So, and I think that at this point, I would not think that this is a problem, that there are no meetings. I think more important is actually this background work at the level of civil society. If we talk about strategies and understanding that it's most likely a long-term thing, and most likely it's going to be a point where there's a window of opportunity, and we have to be ready to seize the opportunity. Because with so much instability and so much uncertainty, it's very difficult to build definite strategies. So there has to be a sort of this opportunistic strategy when you build yourself up and you prepare and you just seize the opportunities when they arise. So that's basically all I wanted to say.
Yes, please. Actually, I wanted to ask you to respond to some of the questions which Yulia posed right now.
Yeah, exactly, Dmitro. Thank you, Yulia. Excellent remarks. I would like to respond to 2 points. First one is that Lukashenko was that brave man that refused to send Belarusian troops to Ukraine. Since the beginning of the war, Lukashenko has done everything that he was asked to do by Putin, and until now he plays a very material role in this war, providing all possible resources, including political, information resources, material, and so on and so forth. The fact that Belarusian forces have never been sent to combat in Ukraine is the result of Belarusian society lack of support for this war. And the decision not to do this belongs to both Putin and Lukashenko, because they realized if they do this, this will have unforeseen consequences for both of them that could disrupt the whole thing. So it was not a goodwill of Lukashenko or his heroism before Putin, but realization that doing that would not affect much on the battlefield, but would bring significant consequences for both. And second is about the meeting of Svetlana Tikhanovskaya with President Zelensky. This is one of rather popular questions I received during meetings with foreign partners. The question is like, so what's going on with Ukrainians? Like, how is your dialogue? Why not? Like, what's stopping you from developing these political contacts? Everybody understands that Ukraine now has a very special position in foreign affairs. That the word and deed of Ukraine weighs a lot. So you can influence positions of many other states. Some of them in the assessment of the situation in Belarus, and the following steps they have stopped halfway. Sort of, they do not recognize Lukashenko, but they do not act on this always. And Ukraine's position here can influence and sway towards being more resolute and more practical in what they do to support Belarus. We have a bit of a funny observation, probably a strategy, that if Svetlana Tikhanovskaya meets with the foreign leaders, if she shakes hands with them, there will be never a handshake with Lukashenko from those leaders. So we are sort of taking over country by country from Lukashenko, kind of denying him the space for international work. And Ukraine in this equation is definitely a jewel that we have not yet been able to sort of come to and to feel like home. So this is still work in progress, and why it is important for us, because this will affect psychologically the elites around Lukashenko. For many years, for decades, Lukashenko has proven himself to be a master survivor in many crises. Yes, he has weathered many storms. And the people around him also still believe that he might survive this one as well. And if they see that this is not the case, that even Ukraine has gone the other way, that they abandon Lukashenko as a perspective partner in these relations, this might serve what Pavlo said about splitting elites inside the country. And this is one of our strategic objectives, splitting elites around.
There was also another question of Yulia, which you haven't mentioned. The question was, so how do you come to power? What's your strategy? Is there a strategy how to come to power in Belarus?
Well, that's a rather complicated question. Of course, we were supposed to be back to Belarus by New Year 2020. So that was the sense in the office of Svetlana Tikhanovskaya when I came there in December 2020, that it is about to happen. It's very close. Since then, we had to change our projections on when we come home. First then 3 months, then 6 months, then 1 year, and so on and so forth. Now we feel that we have to demonstrate not just the speed of action and our return to home, but our resolve to stay involved and not to let it go, and just to achieve our objective no matter what. This also psychologically affects the regime, because when they see that we are well organized, we are institutionalized, we have necessary resources, political, financial, and so on and so forth, there is no way for them to avoid the responsibility and to avoid democratic change in Belarus. But if we speak about the strategy of democratic change, how we come back home, we need to apply pressure on the regime from all possible directions. We have to work on splitting the elites. We have to develop the movement that would be meant not only to survive, but also to win in this fight. We are building up relations with our partners to the point not only to keep them consolidated, their position on Lukashenko consolidated, but also we're building institutional structures with the West. I would mention just a few. This is the contact group on relations with the Council of Europe. This has never happened before. The Council of Europe, an intergovernmental organization, would sign on relations with a non-state entity. It's happening now. We have established the Belarus EU consultative group, which meets twice a year in Brussels, discussing the Belarus EU agenda. Also, an institution that is important for us, since EU is in the EU's backyard. This December, we are launching strategic dialogue with the United States on our bilateral agenda. Also, hasn't happened before that US would sign up for this kind of format of relations with non-state entity. And there are a number of such initiatives and institutions that we're gradually building up to help us not only now, but also in when we come back home, and we have to redevelop completely relations with our international partners, would change the foreign affairs agenda. And so there is no clear strategy kind of that you could say like this is what exactly brings us home. But what we must ensure now is that when there is no change in the Ukraine's assessment of the situation in Belarus, and there is no temptation to resume relations with Lukashenko because of pragmatic interests. Would like to see, of course, Ukraine being a leader, that regional leader who builds its foreign policy regionally and internationally, not only on pragmatic interests, but also on values. So that would be an insurance against rapprochement with Lukashenko in spite of his negative role in this war.
Okay, thank you. So now I would like to ask the audience to take questions, comments, reflections on what you heard. So I see Gennady and Valery, and who else? No? Okay, so please, Gennady first.
Thank you so much for presentations, for just revealing your positions. I have questions to Valery. you mentioned Lublin Triangle as potential format for cooperation with Belarusian democratic forces. What activity would you envisage for this format? How it could be instrumental to just forces cooperation, especially maybe in formats have to tackle security issues where we could be on the same page. I think it might be interesting to listen about this constellation.
Okay, and now please, Igor, you have the mic.
Yes, good afternoon, Igor Berlian, Sector Media. Thank you very much for a very interesting discussion. And actually, I have a question about the recent news announced by Svetlana Tikhanovskaya that there will be passports for new Belarus citizens. And it got like a hot debate at the 10th Warsaw Security Forum. And what is your position regarding new passports, and how will you work with the Western authorities? And just quick follow-up, my reflection about Belarus. Actually, the strategy will be formed only after our understanding of how we see Belarus here in Ukraine, how we see its future in Europe. Because what we've seen during the Lublin Triangle, that actually is a good format. But when there are tactical political questions such as grain in Poland, Polish elections, Slovak elections, such a format won't help with bilateral relations. So, yes, thank you very much.
So please.
Thank you. So first on Lublin Triangle, interestingly that in March 2021, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya was invited to participate in the meeting of Ministers of Foreign Affairs of Poland, Ukraine, and Lithuania, and the Ukraine initiated that invitation. So the Minister Kuleba asked Svetlana Tikhanovskaya to join. That was the last time she participated because before the next meeting, the war started, and that was probably that became inappropriate, I guess, in the early 2022. But we consider this a very successful initiative, even though Belarus is not part of this. But it seems that 3 countries progressed a lot in developing this format and bringing the resources together. We still think that Belarus should be part of this conversation, and what could be accomplished there is essentially the whole range of sectors of foreign policy. We could start with political communications, which would be a very suitable format to speak about the future of Belarus through joint communications of 4 leaders. We can speak about supporting the capacity of New Belarus to support internships of Belarusians who are willing to participate in building a new Belarus. On the security side, there was an initiative to bring Belarusians into joint battalion of Lithuanian, Ukrainian, Polish battalion that Belarusians can also be trained in this regard. But speaking about security sphere in general, it would be right to establish exchange of information, since we have some information as well about what's happening in Belarus, to coordinate further what needs to be done in this regard to plan ahead jointly. We can also plan for contingencies, and this is something that is badly missing now. There were several groundbreaking developments even this year. This is deteriorating health of Lukashenko in May when he disappeared for a week, and second, Prigozhin's march. And for both these developments, we have not been ready, and I don't think that not everybody was ready for these developments. There was no plan of action or no protocol that can be developed now and should be agreed now by all interested forces here. But generally speaking, with the Lublin Triangle, or with other formats. What we can do now, we can project our vision of the future into today's action. We do not have to wait until the future comes to us, and when the conditions for us to act and to be close and to build up partnerships are ideal. We have to start doing this now, and this would shape the future the way we want to see it. Just for example, the EU has adopted this comprehensive package of support for democratic Belarus for 3 billion euros. That was in May 2021. And that was specifically meant for a democratic Belarus. So the message here is that we want to see Belarus democratic state, and this is when this help would come, and that would be only the beginning. So in such a way, the EU was bold enough to envision that Belarus is democratic, and it has help when it is democratic, when it needs this help most of all. So the Lublin Triangle or any other initiatives, be it B9 or Baltic Black Sea Commonwealth that is also being discussed from time to time, all these initiatives can help us mold the future the way we want to see it, not to allow others to fill the gap, like, for example, Russia. And the question about passport, yes, this initiative has progressed quite a bit. We had technical consultations with the European Commission. We received technical expert advice on developing the design that would be compatible with our standards. Now we're in the process of producing the specimens of these documents, which is a necessary step to ask for recognition of these documents. And we are building up now the issuing authorities that would be controlled by the Office of Svetlana Tikhanovskaya and United Transitional Cabinet. But the idea is that this will be a national passport of Belarus that will be a sort of a composite solution, because we cannot use a country code, BLR, that is controlled now by the state because of legal implications. So we had to find a state that would be willing to lend us their country code. So it hasn't happened before, but it's going to happen with us. Why it is important for us? Many Belarusians have faced the problem with replacing documents or changing their passports. Since the regime, even from since 2020, they started creating these obstacles for people just to make their lives miserable, or to force them to come back to Belarus to replace documents and to get into trouble because many of them have been arrested and placed in prison. In September this year, Lukashenko made this a policy. So this is not just an unfortunate occasion any longer. This is a state-run policy which affects potentially up to 2 million Belarusians who live abroad. According to different estimates, up to 2 million Belarusian citizens are abroad now. So for us, this is a way to help resolve for Belarusians a very practical issue. While the state abandons it's one of the basic functions to document citizens, we are picking up this function and we're doing this for people. Also, it's important that this passport, national passport of Belarus, becomes a practical instrument to unite Belarusians wherever they are, so that the Belarusian nation has agency even if Belarusians have to leave the country temporarily. We believe in this. But there are national symbols like coat of arms and flag and hymn. The passport has it all, but also it serves practical needs of people. And this what helps us maintain cohesion in this Belarusian community abroad to establish the agency of Belarusians wherever we are.
Thank you. I see a hand over there, and yeah, please.
I cannot say it now. It has not been formalized yet, but yeah, it should happen so.
Anyone else from the panel to comment on the questions on Lublin Triangle or whatever? Oh, okay. I don't see any hands. Actually, I mean, yeah, please.
I should comment concerning strategy and regime change in Belarus. Actually, I don't think that changing of Belarusian authorities can be a part of some kind of strategy, because if we speak about authoritarian regimes like Belarusian, changing it's some short-term process. It's not long-term process. It's impossible to have some plans for several years to oust Lukashenko, because it's not like democracy, these elections, and so on and so forth. So I would stress that strategy should be based on some long-term strategies or long-term processes, like information flows, like identity, like education, like science, research, and so on and so forth. So should be the basis, because we can influence on these things, and it's very difficult for Belarusian authorities to control all these spheres. But if we speak about changes of political at the political level of Belarus, it can be. It seems not a part of strategy, but just an opportunity, and some window of opportunity that will be open in some moment of Belarusian history.
Okay, so if I can, I will try to summarize what I've heard, and you just please feel free to react if you think I have understood something not correctly. So what we are having now, we have political reality in Belarus, which is a threat for its neighbors, for Ukraine and for Poland, Lithuania, other countries of the EU. And I think most of the threat is for Ukraine, definitely, because Ukraine is not part of NATO. And Ukraine has already felt and seen and felt aggression act from the territory of Belarus. Now there is some sort of de-escalation of this threat from the territory of Belarus to Ukraine, immediate direct threat. I mean, over 1 year we don't have a missile attack from the territory of Belarus over Ukrainian territory. Still, I think everyone understands that no one trusts Lukashenko, and whatever kind of silent deal is made, no one trusts him. I mean, if you're, you should be insane like Prigozhin to trust Lukashenko's guarantees on whatever. But the question is that there seems to be like no short-term solution, no short-term way out of it, of change. And what we are discussing now, as far as I could understand, is basically agile strategy. Like we prepare conditions, preconditions, kind of various grounds for quickly come to actions when there is a window of opportunity. Like some crisis happens, whatever. Do I understand it correctly? What I've just heard? Basically, more or less coherent picture, just from different angles, but I think coherent picture. And if so, then actually I would ask. I think, if such calculation, I think then I'm not surprised that Ukrainian authorities do not meet Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. Right now, to do it, we will not expect anything in short term to happen after that. But we probably will have some sort of additional threat to feel from that. There's high risk of it. So if we have such calculation, then I think kind of this tactical situation which we have now, I don't think that is a long-term strategy from Ukrainian line whatsoever. But so far, it's a kind of fragile tactical situation which probably will be there for some time, but of course can change. But Do you agree with this analysis, or kind of summary of what I've heard here, or you disagree and you think that something here is wrong what I presented?
Yeah, well, what's missing here is that many Western states are trying to help Belarusian effort to bring democracy back to Belarus, to liberate Belarus. And many of them committed to this task, to see Belarus as democratic, sovereign, independent state, and they're acting on this one way or another. Ukraine has also expressed interest in seeing Belarus democratic, but at the same time, we have not seen much of follow-up action on this. This means that the front, the consolidated front on democratic Belarus is incomplete. And Ukraine is one of the most meaningful actors in this combination. We believe that its participation, its role would bring a lot of change, would bring a lot of impact into this effort. We believe that if it happens sooner, the change will come to Belarus also sooner. So we don't have to wait for the contingency. We don't have to wait for a crisis point. We have to establish it. We have to develop it. We have to help it come. And this is when the change will come to Belarus. We're also all, I guess, realistic that Lukashenko's Belarus will never provide security guarantees to Ukraine more. This is just not realistic. Nobody will trust Lukashenko, and it's only democratic Belarus that is capable of bringing security guarantees that would be ironclad. This also means that if Ukraine and when Ukraine wins and Belarus is still non-democratic and this is still under control of Russia, Ukraine will always feel unsafe, that there will be a threat looming over Ukraine from the north, because while Lukashenko is there, he will always be under control of Russia. And how do you resolve this? What do you do about this? Do you wait until later, or do you act now? So this is the choice for the Ukrainian authorities. When do you want to start resolving the situation? I do not see obstacles to start doing it now. We don't have to start with the highest level meeting of President Zelensky and Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. There are many other ways to come together, be it on the expert level or through Verkhovna Rada or information space. A lot of things could be done, and the agenda could be dense already today. So we don't have to delay this action. Thanks.
Okay, anyone else to comment? Andrei?
I have just one comment concerning the threats from Belarus, because I think it's very important to understand what is the main threat, actually. I don't think that Russian troops in the territory of Belarus and Russian army is the main problem, because the possibility of invasion from the north is minimal, and it will be a catastrophe for the invaders. At least we don't see any signs of such actions. The same concerning using of airspace for strikes, because Russia can use other directions. And to my mind, it should be clearly understood that the main threat, military threat from Belarus is Belarusian military industry, because this is the main tool to increase Russian military capacity.
Thank you. Pavlo or Yulia? Nothing? Okay. Okay, thank you. I mean, I think it was very interesting discussion, and maybe we will continue over the break to discuss further. As I understand, there is no kind of clear-cut strategic plan, because life is more complicated than any plan which could be put on paper. But there were a lot of ideas suggested here, and I agree we need to do and to act in order for some changes, longer term change to happen in some more distant future. So being realistic, but at the same time strategic, being cautious, but at the same time clear in our intentions, and delivering on what we set forth as our strategic goals. So thank you very much.